The greatest challenge the German forces faced on the Western Front after D-Day in June 1944 was the complete loss of control over the skies above the battlefields. Since 1943, the relentless British and American bomber offensives against German cities, industries and transport networks had inflicted devastating damage. The overstretched Luftwaffe struggled to inflict serious losses on the intruding bombers, its effectiveness steadily eroding. With the arrival of P-51 Mustangs escorting the bombers deep into German territory, the situation deteriorated even further. During the chaotic fighting retreat through France in the summer of 1944, German panzer divisions were relentlessly hunted by Allied ground attack aircraft. Offensive operations had become almost impossible, with movement limited almost entirely to the cover of night. When the German front lines eventually stabilised in late autumn along the West Wall defences, the fortified border of Western Germany, the Wehrmacht finally gained a brief breathing space. This pause allowed them to regroup and prepare for a new offensive. Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe to begin mustering aircraft for a major new operation in the West. Few knew exactly what his plans entailed at first, but by September 1944, the concept for what would become the Ardennes Offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, began to take shape. Hitler envisioned a powerful combined panzer and infantry thrust through the Ardennes, aiming to capture the crucial Allied supply port of Antwerp in Belgium. The goal was to split the British and American armies and cut off their replenishment lines, a bold move that he hoped would turn the tide of the war. It was to be Hitler's last gamble in the West, and the Luftwaffe would have a critical role to play in supporting it. On the 16th of September 1944, General Werner Cripple, chief of the Luftwaffe General Staff, received a direct order from Hitler to prepare aircraft for an upcoming Western offensive. By the 21st of October, as planning for the Ardennes operation advanced, Cripple ordered that a large portion of Germany's fighter strength, previously dedicated to defending the Reich against Allied bombers, be transferred to Air Command West. This decision severely weakened Germany's already strained ability to inflict casualties on the RAF and USAAF bomber streams. Hermann Göring, still head of the Luftwaffe but long out of favour with Hitler, saw an opportunity to restore his reputation. Eager to deliver a success, he made no objections to the illogical redistribution of forces. Through careful rationing of aircraft and fuel, Air Command West managed to assemble roughly 2,400 tactical aircraft for the defence of Western Germany. Many Luftwaffe commanders assumed this powerful force would soon be unleashed in an overwhelming counter-air strike known as Der große Schlag, the Great Blow. In this long-anticipated operation, the majority of German fighters would rise simultaneously to intercept and annihilate the American bomber streams, overwhelming their escorts and inflicting catastrophic losses, enough, they hoped, to temporarily halt daylight raids on Germany. But those expectations were crushed when commanders learned the true purpose behind the concentration of aircraft, a massive daylight ground attack operation in support of the Ardennes ground offensive through the snow-covered forests. The Luftwaffe faced enormous difficulties. They possessed aircraft in large numbers, but not enough pilots or fuel. The pilot shortage was the most severe. Many were young, barely trained, and dangerously inexperienced. Much would depend on the few remaining veterans, the decorated aces and seasoned squadron leaders who formed the hardened core of Germany's dwindling fighter force. Operation Bodenplatte, base plate, was originally scheduled to launch simultaneously with the opening of the Ardennes ground attack on the 16th of December 1944. However, the very weather that had concealed Hitler's ground offensive from Allied reconnaissance also grounded the Luftwaffe. Bodenplatte was delayed until the 1st of January 1945, by which point Hitler's offensive had already begun to lose momentum. Meanwhile, a secondary attack, Operation Northwind, was launched against the thinly held US front in Alsace and Lorraine along the Franco-German border. Nordwind commenced on the 31st of December 1944, and under clearer skies, Bodenplatte was finally launched on New Year's Day 1945. The targets were 16 Allied air bases spread across France, Belgium and the Netherlands, all heavily stocked with Spitfires, Mustangs, Typhoons, Mitchell bombers and B-17 flying fortresses belonging to the RAF, USAAF, Royal Canadian Air Force and Royal New Zealand Air Force. In total, the Luftwaffe deployed 1,035 aircraft, mostly Messerschmitt Bf-109S and Focke-Wulf Fu-19OS, along with a few of the new Messerschmitt Me-2, 6-2 jet fighter bombers. For security reasons, most pilots were informed of their specific targets only moments before takeoff. Hurried briefings that added immense pressure on already nervous and inexperienced airmen. The veteran group commanders, however, knew exactly what this mission represented. Bodenplatte was the death ride of the Luftwaffe. Their objective was brutally simple: to strafe and destroy every Allied plane, hangar and fuel depot they could see. The hope was that such destruction would cripple Allied air power long enough to give the German ground forces in the Ardennes and Alsace a brief window to push forward to victory. But hasty planning led to catastrophe. German flak units, numerous and heavily armed throughout Western Germany and the Dutch coast, had not been properly notified about the large-scale Luftwaffe sortie. Believing any formation of aircraft overhead must be Allied, they opened fire. German pilots found themselves running a deadly gauntlet of their own anti-aircraft fire, even before reaching their targets. Many planes were shot down or damaged by friendly fire before they ever encountered the enemy. Meanwhile, British signals intelligence had detected increased German air activity, but did not realise that a massed assault was imminent. This allowed the attacking Luftwaffe to retain the crucial element of surprise. Sweeping in low, the Bf-109S and Fw-190S thundered over their targets, strafing Allied airfields with cannons and machine guns, destroying anything they could find on the ground. The results varied from base to base as anti-aircraft gunners and RAF regiment troops sprang into action. All over Belgium and Holland, the same scene unfolded. The Luftwaffe had launched hundreds of aircraft in an all-out attempt to smash Allied air power on the ground. In several areas, Allied fighters were already airborne, and vicious dogfights erupted in the skies. Overhead, British, American and German aircraft clashed in the greatest aerial combat since the Battle of Britain. Many of Germany's most experienced fighter leaders were killed in these intense engagements, further crippling the Luftwaffe's leadership and skill base. Despite the high cost, damage at several air bases was significant. Some installations were rendered nearly inoperable, while others escaped with lighter losses. One of the most devastating attacks occurred at Eindhoven in the Netherlands, where Jagdgeschwader 3 destroyed 47 Canadian aircraft and damaged another 43. The overall results of Bodenplatte were murky. US Army Air Force records were incomplete and often underreported losses, but later research by historians suggests the Germans destroyed approximately 290 Allied aircraft on the ground and damaged another 180. In air-to-air combat, German pilots shot down about 15 Allied aircraft and damaged 10 more, for a total of roughly 305 destroyed and 190 damaged. At first glance, these figures appear impressive, but the Luftwaffe suffered catastrophic losses of its own: 143 pilots killed, 70 captured and 21 wounded, including 22 senior officers, men who were irreplaceable at that stage of the war. For the Allies, Bodenplatte was only a temporary setback. They quickly replaced their aircraft and resumed operations within days. The Germans could replace aircraft too, but not trained pilots, and that made all the difference. The Luftwaffe's ability to intercept Allied bombers and support German ground forces collapsed irreparably. Strategically, the operation had achieved nothing lasting. In hindsight, the Germans would have been better served targeting Allied air crews, not the empty planes on the ground. Crews were far harder to replace than machines, but such precision strikes required better planning and far more capable pilots, resources the Luftwaffe simply no longer had. Some historians argue the Luftwaffe should have preserved its fighter strength for Der große Schlag, the great blow against American bombers. Without Hitler's interference, such an operation might have inflicted serious disruption on the US daylight bombing campaign, buying the Reich precious time. Instead, Operation Bodenplatte became another tragic example of wasted effort, a costly illusion born from Hitler's deteriorating grasp of reality in early 1945. As one German historian later wrote, Operation Bodenplatte dealt the Luftwaffe fighter arm a mortal blow and sealed its fate. What followed was nothing more than a dying flicker. Today, the operation stands as another stark reminder of the fundamental flaw in Germany's air warfare strategy, the attempt to employ a tactical air arm without first securing air superiority. It proved once again to be a disastrous and impossible endeavour. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, share, and help support future films.